Hilchos Pesulei Hamukdashin Perek Achad Osar. The laws of disqualified sacrifices, chapter 11. We're done with the birds. It's not too complicated from here on out. The structure basically that the Rambam is following is going through all the different categories of sacrifices and telling you how they could go wrong. So the first 6 chapters, I think it was, is disqualified animal sacrifices. Then the next 4 chapters is disqualified bird sacrifices. Now we're going to disqualified flower offerings, mincha. That's the other category of sacrifices which we have to deal with and talk about all the possible ways that they could go wrong. So with a mincha, just like with a animal sacrifice, you have some integral stages of the offering. With the animal, there's 4 integral stages. There's the slaughtering, the shchita, then you have the kabbalah, you receive the blood, then you have the zrika, the halacha, you bring the blood to the mizbeach, then you have the zrika, you sprinkle it on the mizbeach. With the mincha also, we have a bunch of integral steps. The main one, the big feature, is the kmitza. Kmitza is you take 3 fingers full, dip it into the flour, after the flour has been mixed with oil, and you take out this 3 fingers full. This is the holy part. This part is put separately into a holy utensil, a holy vessel, and it's offered on the mizbeach. And there are other things that are done, but the kmitza is the main thing. So the Rambam says, halacha aleph, kol hamenachos, any flour offering, shekmatzon echad min hapsulin la'avayda. If any person who was disqualified for service did the kmitza, either, let's say classically you weren't a Kohen, or even if you were a Kohen but you weren't in the right state of ritual purity, and you weren't allowed to serve and you did the kmitza, harehim psuleis, the kmitza which you've done is disqualified. V'cheinim liket halavayna. Another integral step of the mincha offering is that, it's kind of a funny procedure, it's one of the places where you see how sacrifices don't make so much sense logically. The mitzvah is to place levayna, to place frankincense on the flour, but then before you take the flour, you have to remove all the frankincense to one side. So if a person who was disqualified for service did that step of moving all the frankincense away, pasal afal pisha kamatz, he disqualifies the mincha, even if he didn't do the 3 fingers full, even if he didn't do the kmitza. Just the moving of the levayna is itself disqualifying. Halacha beis, here are some more cases of disqualifying. Kamatz hakosher, v'nasan lapasol. A kosher Kohen does the kmitza. David is a kosher Kohen. He does the kmitza on the mincha, and then he hands it off to me. I'm puzzled. I'm a disqualified person for service in the temple. When Mashiach comes, maybe, as I'm a firstborn son, so it says that the firstborn sons are going to get back the service in the temple. But for now, I'm puzzled. So if David does a kmitza on the mincha and he hands it off to me, kamatz biminay v'nasam lismailoi, or he does the kmitza with his right hand, which is the way it's supposed to be done, and then passes it on to his left hand, and from the left hand he puts it into the holy utensil. That's also no good. Kamatz mikli kaidesh v'nasan likli chayil. Also, if the Kohen takes the kmitza from a holy utensil, which is great, but then he puts the kmitza into an unholy utensil, pasal. In all these cases, you've disqualified the mincha. And the simple reading of the Rambam implies, Kesef Mishnah says the same thing, that these are permanent disqualifications. You cannot correct them, even though from the Rambam elsewhere in his commentary to the Mishnah, it sounds like you could correct them, but as the Rambam is simply read over here, that's it. 1 strike and you're out. Halacha Gimel, kamatz v'ola biyadai tzrer. Kohen does kmitza. Just for the picture, I made this for illustration. It's not how you do kmitza. Kmitza you actually do with 1 hand, just with 3 fingers, but just for the imagination purposes, okay? He picks up some flour, v'ola biyadai tzrer, and in the flour is a pebble. Or not a pebble, or it's a piece of, it's a grain of salt, or it's a grain of frankincense. Pasul is disqualified. And not for the reason you might think, not because it's like dirty or not nice for Hashem. The reason that this kmitza is disqualified is because that means that you don't have a full kmitza. So in order to take a handful, you have to have 3 fingers full. All 3 fingers full have to be full of flour. If there's a pebble in there, it's not all full of flour. Halacha dalid kamatz adshu bachutz. V'nichnas lifnim, a Kohen did the kmitza outside. Outside means outside temple courtyard, because the mincha is a holy of holy sacrifice, has to be offered within the temple premises. Kohen goes outside, takes the bowl of flour outside, does the kmitza while he's outside, v'nichnas lifnim, then he enters inside. Yachzer v'yikmitz bifnim v'kosher. This is correctable. Correctable meaning you can just do kmitza again while you're inside and it's kosher. Halacha hey nispazer hakoimetz al gabi haritzba. If after the Kohen does the kmitza, all the flour falls down and scatters on the floor. Yachzer v'ya'asfenu the Kohen is allowed to go and regather it. And the commentaries here point out that this is only okay if it had scattered from a utensil. Kohen took the kmitza, puts it in a utensil, and from the utensil it falls on the floor. Kind of like we had with the blood. If the Kohen receives the blood from the animal in a cup, and then the cup spills onto the floor, you can pick it up again. But if the mincha would spill right out of his hand, he does the kmitza, and then boom, it falls out of his hand. That's like in the case of the blood. If the Kohen, if the blood just spills onto the floor and the Kohen tries gathering it from the floor to begin with, that's no good. Halacha vav, hoisa mincha shalei b'kli sharis. If the flour offering before the kmitza was done wasn't in a holy utensil, which is not how it's supposed to be. Or the kmitza part was not in a holy utensil. Or you brought it to the mizbeach. This is a big part of the mincha offering, is bringing the mincha bowl, touching it to the southwestern corner of the mizbeach. So you brought it to the mizbeach without a proper utensil. Or you mixed it with oil, but you did it outside temple courtyard. Psula ad shatia blilasa bifnim. That's disqualified until you mix it inside the temple premises. Halacha zayin, other stages involved in the mincha. Kol haminacha is sheyatzak aleyan hashemen posol la'avoda. A big part of the mincha offering is pouring oil on the flour. So what if the pouring of the oil on the flour was done by a person who's disqualified for service, like a non-Kohen or somebody like him, or the non-Kohen was involved in a different stage. Blalan is the mixing. But first you pour the oil on the flour, then you mix the oil in the flour. Psasam is sometimes you have to break, they used to bake these wafers, minchas, and you have to break them into pieces, into 2 and into 4. Melachan is to salt them, every carbon had to be salted. If a non-Kohen did any of these things, ksheirais, the mincha is still kosher. These are all like preparatory steps. He gishon oihen nifan. If a non-Kohen did this, he did the hagasha, he brought the bowl to the corner of the mizbeach, or he did the waving. A big part of the mincha offering is the waving of the mincha. You picked it up, you wave it back and forth, up and down. If so, these two things are correctable. Really, a Kohen should have done it. If a non-Kohen did it, have a Kohen do it again. Take the bowl, bring it to the mizbeach, take the bowl, you wave it. But after the fact, if the Kohen didn't do that, it's still kosher. Shenemar, because it says, Vehevia el b'nei Aharon v'kamatz. This is talking about the mincha. Person brings the flour offering to the sons of Aaron, and he does the kmitza. What does that tell you? That the only time having a Kohen is essential, mikmitza ve'elach mitzvahs kahuna, from the three fingers full time and onwards, that's when a Kohen has to be involved. Limed al yitziko blila sheksheira bizar. Anything before that, the pouring of the oil, the mixing of the oil with the flour, these are all kosher to be done with a non-Kohen. Halacha ches mincha shenafal l'seicha shemen mincha acheres shemen chulin kol shehu. You have a flour offering, and oil falls into it, but not the oil that belongs to it. Oil from a different flour offering, or oil that's the chlal not holy. Nifsala, boom, disqualified, it's out. Chiser shamna, if you put too little oil, psula, disqualified also. Chiser levainasa, if you put too little frankincense, this is the frankincense in more of a raw state before it's ground. If you put the frankincense in a lesser amount than what's required, ksheira, it's kosher. V'husha yiyoleh shnei krate levaina. So long as 2, I guess you call them grains or 2 pieces of frankincense are on the flour offering, that's the minimum amount required. Aval kairet echad psula, but if it's just 1 grain, it's disqualified. Shenemar, because it says eis kol levainasa. All of its frankincense, meaning it has to be more than 1 piece. Now these words, eis kol levainasa, don't exist anywhere in the Torah in those exact words. It's either a reference to this verse here, the eis kol halevaina. This is the verse mentioned in the Talmud. Or if you look over here in the verse I posted in the last picture, it says al kol levainasa. So the word kol levainasa is used, just not with the preface eis, rather the preface al. The point being, either way, Torah says the word kol twice about levaina. It has to be all the frankincense. All meaning there's more than 1 piece. Okay. Halacha tes. Riba sham no levainasa. You put too much oil, too much levaina. You're supposed to put, as we saw in the laws of sacrificial procedures, that for every isara in a flour, you put 1 lug of oil. What if you put more? Ad shnei lugin l'chol isarein, u'shnei kumtzei levaina l'chol mincha, until double the proper measurement, anywhere until 2 loig of oil per isarein, or 2 kmatzim, 2 handfuls of levaina per mincha, ksheira, that's kosher. Shnei lugin, shnei kmatzim, yesar al zeh, once you go more than double the amount, double or more I should say, psula, it's disqualified. That's way too much. Halacha yud, there's one type of flour offering that doesn't get any oil or frankincense. Actually 2, but we're going to talk about one. It's called the mincha of the sinner. There are some sins for which you bring the carbon oile v'yored, the fluctuating sacrifice. If you could afford it, you bring an animal. If you can't afford it, you bring birds. If you can't even afford that, you bring flour. In that case, when a person did a sin and he cannot afford to bring anything other than flour, Torah clearly says, here's the verse, Lo yasim aleha shemen v'lo yitin aleha levayna. You cannot place oil or frankincense on it. So the Rambam says, minchas choitei, the mincha of a sinner, shenasan aleha shemen ala kaimet shalah, that he puts oil on it, or on the handful, the 3 fingers after it was removed, nifsalah, it becomes disqualified, because he violated the mitzvah of lo yasim aleha shemen, and there's no way to take it back. Once you put oil into flour, you can't extract it. But nasan aleha levayna yilaktena. If you placed frankincense on it, then you can simply pick it off because it doesn't mix in. Hoysa shchuka, if it was ground too much to a powder. Now, because it's impossible to gather it up, now you're in doubt whether it's disqualified. Halacha yud aleph nasan shemen al shiyareha achar shekamatz. What if you did it properly? Mincha of the sinner, no oil, no frankincense. Kohen comes, does the kmitza, so it's technically over, the service is over, takes the kmitza to the mizbeach. The leftover flour is called the shirayim. The leftovers, he puts oil on that. No lashes, no disqualification, it's kosher, because the kmitza was done in a proper way, before you put any oil. So you're good. Yud beis, nasan mashahu shemen, al gabe kezayis min amincha. If you put, basically going to talk about how much oil do you have to put on this mincha of the sinner to disqualify. So if you put a tiny amount, even a mashahu, the tiniest amount, as long as it's on an olive-sized portion of the mincha, psala misafik, you have disqualified it out of doubt. Avolim nasan hashemen al pachis mikazayis lay psala. But if you put the oil on less than an olive-sized portion of the sinner's mincha, you haven't disqualified it because it's not considered an important entity enough to disqualify. With the frankincense, you have to put an olive-sized portion of frankincense. When it comes to oil, even the smallest amount is disqualified, as long as it's on an olive-sized portion. When it comes to the levaina, you have to put at least an olive-sized portion of the levaina. Yud gimel afilu nasan al levaina al kol shu min mincha pasal. And it's the opposite also for how much you have to have. For the levaina, even if you put it on the tiniest amount of the mincha, you've disqualified it ad she'ilake till you gather it off. So you have the 2 opposites. For the oil, how much do you have to put on to disqualify? Tiniest amount. On how much? On an olive-sized portion. With the levaina, it's punkt farkeret, exactly the opposite. Yeah, how much do you have to put? At least an olive-sized portion. On how much? Tiniest amount. Halacha yudalid gibla b'mayim b'kamatz. Typically, when do you do kmitza? You do kmitza while the flour is still dry. It's just regular flour, and you do kmitza. What if you first kneaded the flour with water, and then you did kmitza from like a doughy substance? Huh? Right, you're kind of going to be gathering dough essentially, or watery dough. Nevertheless, says the Rambam, ksheira, it's kosher. Lo nemar chareva. The only reason Torah says it has to be chareva means dry. Torah says clearly any mincha has to be dry. So it would seem dry means no water. No, dry means lo nemar chareva ela mishemen. Dry means dry from oil, but it could have water. Ideally, it shouldn't have water, but if it does, it's kosher. Tezvav mincha shekmatza pa'amayim ksheira. If you did kmitza twice on a mincha, that's fine. Afilu pa'amim rabbis, even if you do it multiple times. So long as you end up offering on the mizbeach a full kazayas, a full olive-sized portion at least at once, because there is no offering on the mizbeach that's less than an olive-sized portion. If a person by mistake offers the kmitza without salt, salt is an integral part of every sacrifice, even flour offerings. And if you didn't put salt in the flour, psula, disqualified. Salt is essential to the mincha, as we explained. Mincha shechasra kaidem kmitza. If the amount of flour in the mincha became less than the required amount before you did kmitza, you have to have at least an isarin. Every time you bring a mincha, it has to be at least an isarin of flour. So what if you lost that amount. Some of it spilled out or whatever before the kmitza was able to be done. The 3 fingers full. That's the mainstay of the mincha. So if it's missing some flour, you can just bring new flour and fill it up. The fact that you already put it into a holy utensil doesn't make it fully holy. It's the kmitza which will make it holy. So as long as you didn't do the kmitza yet, you can still fill it up with more flour from your house. A person decides to donate just a handful of frankincense, which you could do. Usually, frankincense accompanied a mincha. But if you want to just be generous with your frankincense and donate some to the temple, that's fine. Im chaser kol shehu pasul. But if it's missing even the slightest amount, disqualified. We remember the lechem aponim, the showbread. Every Shabbos was eaten by the Kohanim, and there was 2 little spoons here, not sure if you can see them here, 2 little spoons of frankincense that were offered on the Mizbeach. So these 2 spoons of frankincense, says the Rambam, im chaser echad mehan kol shehu psulin, if even one of them is missing even the tiniest amount, disqualified. Ad sheyu shnei kmatzin mitchila va'ad soif. They have to retain their volume of 2, 3 fingersfuls from beginning to the end. Yudches. Hifrish shnei kmatzin lemincha achas. A person separates 2 kmitzas. Here we're talking about levaina, frankincense. You're supposed to put aside a handful of frankincense on each mincha. You put 2 handfuls aside. The avad echaman, and one of them gets lost. So which is the proper frankincense that belongs to this mincha? Says the Rambam, koydem kmitza loy hukba. If this was done before you did the actual kmitza of the flour, then the frankincense hasn't yet been established, and the one remaining one, that's the one you'll use. La'achar kmitza. But if this was done after you did the kmitza on the flour, actually hukba upsula. All of that frankincense belongs to this mincha. Now it's disqualified, because this is a classic case of you increasing the amount of levaina which is allowed. So you put aside 2 handfuls. They both belong to the mincha. You lost one, you're missing part of the levaina which you put aside for a sacrifice. Same thing if you did this for the 2 spoons of the lechem aponim. Instead of putting aside 2 handfuls, you put aside 4. 2 per spoon. And 2 got lost. If they got lost before you remove the spoons, before they're ready to go on the mizbeach, the levaina hasn't been established as relating to the spoons, so it's kosher. But once you pick up the spoons, if one of them gets lost, one of the handfuls you set aside, they've become established, and they're disqualified because you just increased the number, and that's okay. So by increasing, you've caused yourself a problem. Now that you've lost the levaina, you're disqualified. A Kohen did kmitza properly on the mincha, it becomes impure. Something touches it that makes it impure, and he still offers it, even though he wasn't supposed to. Hatzitz meratze. This is one of the cases where we say that the fact that the Kohen Gadol is wearing the tzitz, the golden headplate, that achieves atonement. Shenemar, as it says, v'nosa aharon. When Torah describes the tzitz, what does it say? It says, v'hoya al meitzach Aaron, the tzitz will be on Aaron's forehead, v'nosa Aaron esavayna kadashim. And through this tzitz, Aaron will help to forgive for any sins related to sacrifices. And the Talmud derives, this verse is talking about a case of impure sacrifices, that in some cases, even though typically you're not supposed to bring impure sacrifices, if you did, we'll say, you know what, the tzitz achieves atonement. This is one of those examples. However, that's only for impurity. If you have the kmitza, and it went outside of the temple premises, it's supposed to be in here. It went out, the Kohen still takes it back in and offers it. The tzitz does not achieve atonement for this. Tzitz only has the power to achieve atonement for impure stuff, not for exited materials. Chaf. You did the kmitza is okay. The rest of the flour becomes impure. Or gets burnt, or leaves the azara, or gets lost. You cannot offer the kmitza, because it's now a kmitza of nothing. The rest of the mincha is lost. But if you brought it, it still achieves atonement. If even part of the remnants remain holy, kosher, Yaktir hakaimetz, you should offer the kmitza. Ve'oisan hashirayim shenisharu asurin ba'achila. Very interesting law. The remaining, the small amount that remains is actually forbidden to be eaten. Why? Because the Torah says that you have to offer the kmitza, and then the leftovers goes to Aaron and his sons. Says the Talmud, leftovers, but not leftovers of leftovers. In other words, after you do the kmitza, whatever remains, that goes to the Kohanim. If that itself got split, then the Kohanim cannot eat it. Chaf Aleph. You have this sometimes. You could have a utensil that has a divider in the bottom half of the utensil. So you ever see these like cutlery holders, On the top they're all open, but if you go look down, there's like a little split in there. Yes. So there's a little barrier in the bottom of the utensil in which you have the flour. So let's just imagine this is the flour utensil. Okay, so down the bottom half is divided. Yeah. Even though on top it mixes, the top half is open. You should not do kmitza. If you did, it's disqualified. Why, says the Talmud? Because on the bottom it's split. It's like taking kmitza from two utensils. On the other hand, you also see this sometimes. It's only divided on top. Same thing, just as my example. Cutlery holders, you have also on the top they're divided, on the bottom they're open. They just help you kind of place the different cutleries, right? So then, you can take kmitza, because on the bottom it's one utensil, that's the core. The core identity is a single entity. Exactly. Chaf Gimel. Okay, for this you have to have a big bowl. You divided the flour within one utensil, but the parts are not touching. So think about you have a big bowl, and you put a little bit of flour here, a little bit of flour here, a little bit of flour here. So they're all in one utensil. There's no dividers, no barriers, nothing. But they're not touching. No divider between them. It's a doubt. Does the fact that they're all in one utensil unite them or not? Lefichach, therefore, every stage we hesitate. Lo yikmaitz, don't do kmitza. V'im kamatz, if you did kmitza, lo yaktir, don't offer it. V'im hiktir, but if you offered it, hurtza, it achieves atonement. V'lo ye'ochlu hashirayim, but don't eat the leftover of the flour. Chav Dalet, Cohen is a little bit spaced out. Kamatz, he does the kmitza. V'nasan ha'kaimetz l'mayla al hashulchan. Instead of putting the kaimetz on the mizbeach, he walks into the temple structure, he puts it on the table of the lechem aponim. Keneged goiva ma'areches lechem aponim, at the height of the showbread. Totally wrong place. But this table does make some things holy. So the Rambam says, Kitchoy hashulchan lihi pasel, aval eine mikache likarev. The putting it on the shulchan makes it holy enough that it could become disqualified in the future, but it's not holy enough to be offered. You have to first put it in a utensil. That's going to make it holy, and then it's holy enough to be offered. Yeah, you take it back, and that's what I'm saying. It's holy enough that it's in the realm of holiness to become disqualified, but not to be offered yet. Chafhei, these are cases that the Talmud asks and leaves them unresolved, and the Rambam rules as he does in every case of doubt. Hidbik hakaimetz l'doifen hakli b'kamatz. Usually, how do you have kmitza? You have flour. By gravity, it all goes down to the bottom of the utensil, and you do kmitza. What if you manage somehow to pack the flour in a way against the wall of the utensil? It's not touching the floor of the utensil. It's only stuck to the wall. It's packed against the wall. And you do kmitza from the flour as it's packed against the wall. Oy shahafa hakli al yodai v'kamatz mitoicha yupiv lemata. Or again, you pack the flour in a tight way that you can turn the utensil upside down. No flour falls out, and you do kmitza from the utensil as it is upside down with the opening facing downwards. Lo yaktir v'im hiktir hurtza. So ideally, you shouldn't offer such a kaimetz because it's done in the improper way, but if you did, it achieves atonement. Chavav. Isarin shechilkoi v'avad echad mechalakav. You have an isarin in a flour, that's the proper amount for a mincha, you divide it in half. And one of the halves get lost, so what do? You want to replace it. V'hifrish chelek acher tachtav. So you put aside, or you set aside another part of flour instead of it. V'nimtza ha'avud, and now you found the lost half. So if you think about it, you now have three halves. You have the fully kosher half, which is the original half. the second half which you divided from it, which got lost, and the third half which you set aside. They're all three halves are sitting in the one big bowl, not touching each other. Their status will affect each other in different ways. So watch this. Nitma zesha avad. We'll call this the second half. The half that got lost. The second half. If that half becomes impure, we conceptually connect it to the first original half, because that's how they came together. And the fact that the lost half got impure causes the first half to also become disqualified. But the third half, which you put aside, doesn't combine, you can add more flour to it and bring it as a kosher flour offering. Nitma hamufrash, if the third half became disqualified, became impure, since you were planning to attach it to the first half, so conceptually it's also attached to the first half. Mufrash v'rishain mitzdarfin v'nifsalu. The separated new half and the original first half that never got lost become combined and they become disqualified. V'zesha nimtza einay mitzdaref imayim. But the second half, which got lost and now got found, is not combined and could be used for another flour offering. Nitma hachelek harishain. If the first half became disqualified, that is conceptually bound to both halves. The other two become combined and they all become disqualified. Because either way, whether you found the lost one or you used the new one, you were planning to combine it with the first half. So if the first half becomes disqualified, everything is disqualified. Same principle applies to the kmitza. It's not the initial flour bowl, it's the three fingers full. If you did kmitza from the second half, the one that was found, it combines with the first half, and all the remnants of the second half plus the first half can be eaten, but not the third half. If you did kmitza from the third half, its remnants can be eaten, but not the second half, the one that was found. If you took kmitza from the first half, the other two cannot be eaten. Because together those two halves make up a full isarin, and they're considered to be too much remnants. And it looks like, even though it's not, but it looks like a full mincha which hasn't had kmitza done to it, which is disqualified. Now that Rambam addresses another side question, how are you going to bring this kaimetz? You have an isarin and a half. Every kmitza is related to a isarin. So you have three halves. What are you relating this kmitza to? It says that Rambam kmitza tliya b'das hakohen. It's one of those cases where the intent matters. When the kohen does the kmitza, it's what he thinks that matters. And he'll tell his mind, and himself in his mind he'll say, you know what? I'm doing kmitza. I'm having in mind that this kmitza should count only for the proper isarin. The parts aren't touching each other, so there's no combination except for in his mind. I bring a mincha, you bring a mincha, David the Kohen does kmitza for both of us, and both kmitzas get mixed in. You can offer them both together and it's kosher. If I bring a mincha, they do kmitza, and the kmitza gets mixed into a Kohen's flour offering, which is all going to be burnt. Or another flour offering accompanying an animal offering. Or the Kohen Gadol's pancakes in the morning. That's all kosher. Offer it all together, because anyways, everything in this pile is going to the fire. So put it all on the fire together. If you have two minchas that didn't have the kmitza done steps, just full bowls of flour, my bowl of flour, your bowl of flour, and they get mixed up. If it's possible to remove a handful from each one separately, right? Flour mixes, but it doesn't mix fully. If flour falls in from one bowl to another, you can kind of tell. You can say, the top half is the new flour. I can reach into the bottom half and get a second handful of flour. If you can get from both separately, then it's ksherius, it's kosher. Being lav, if not, psulas, that's disqualified. Lamed, koimetz, shenis arev, b'mincha shalenik mitzam. I bring a mincha, you bring a mincha. David does the kmitza for my mincha, and the kmitza falls into your mincha, which hasn't had the kmitza done to it yet. Lo yakter, you cannot offer it. Ve'imhikter akoil, and if you did offer it all, zusha nikmitza also labailim, ve'zusha loy nikmitza loy also labailim. Only the one that had kmitza done from it will count for the owner. The other one, because it has a mix-up of another kmitza, won't count for the owner. You'll have to bring a mincha again. Lamed aleph nis'arev kumtza bish yareha. regular mincha. Kohen does kmitza, and the kmitza falls back in to the remnants. Or 2 minchas, we do kmitza, it's all good. But then before we offer the kmitza, mine and your remnants of flour becomes mixed up. Lo yaktir, in this case you don't offer it. But if you did, also labailim, it does count for the owners.